Round 5, the Rhayader Enduro, again sponsored by Suzuki. Quite a few changes had been made this year. The start was now at Cwmythig Hill, alongside the special test. The organisers, headed by Alan Bates as clerk of the course, had worked hard to bring this round up to what must be classed as world standard. How are you, clerk of the course?
Under pressure. This is worse than riding.
Alan, along with his assistant Trevor Evans and other helpers, had been working hard for months to find some new going in the forests. They'd succeeded, and they promised that we were in for a very interesting weekend. A piece of news we'd just received: the last championship round, the one being organised by the Army, had now been cancelled, so the series was down to 6. That was going to make it interesting. Rhayader was now the penultimate round with just the beacons to come. This meant that the league table would be revised somewhat. Each rider would still discard his worst round, but it meant that we had to take a careful look at the scores. It was good to see Chris Walton here, number 3. Only a fortnight ago he'd crashed heavily at the Dovey. Back to the points table, and the overall leader, Rob Sartin, on 138. When he discards his worst round, the Isker, that brings his total down to 110. Carl Tiley's score is 112, and that goes back to 96 when he discards the Breckland. Number 20, A.D. Smith, his total 121. The Isker and the Dovey were his worst rounds, where he scored 28. Taking one of those scores away leaves him on 93. The reigning champion, John Deacon, has a score of 84 points. That's without the Breckland round, where he scored 18. In the 4-stroke class, Chris Walton had been advised not to ride this weekend, but he was desperate for the points. He hadn't scored at the Dovey. Although he got stuck in one of the ruts, he was looking quite fit today. Chris has a score of 117 points, of course without the Dovey. His rival, Phil Smithson, number 4 today, his score is 111. That's for 3 rounds only. Phil's total is 145. The going in the Wain and the Red Lion forests was quite tough, particularly on the first lap when there was a lot of long grass. Alan Bates had got the times just right, and they got tighter as the day went on. I asked a couple of the riders what they thought of the second lap. John, will you clean this time?
Yeah. I don't know about anyone else, though.
You're going to clean this one this time, Rob?
I'll have to have a go, I think.
You had a bit of time to spare, though, did you?
Yeah, first lap, but this might be a bit tighter now, I think.
I think it's got a bit better to go in, like.
A lot of long grass, I think.
Yeah, a lot has gone down now, yeah.
See where you're going a bit more.
It wasn't only long grass. There were 1 or 2 stretches along the forest roads, and these were very dusty. This Red Lion check was just right. One mistake and the riders would be losing time. Surprisingly, they all got in clean. It was bumpy in places, as A.D. Smith found out. Back at the check, no one had much time in hand. Brooksy had to come straight in. Adrian Nixon was clean, but finding it very hot.
It's bloody warm now, boy. I like the air holes in the shirt, eh? You do with a bit of Mr. Softy, one of them would do, you know.
Pint, I thought you were going to say.
Quite a large one, Adrian would like to have gone to the Happy Union pub, but he was on his way to Alan Bates's next tight check, and that was in the Wain Forest. This check would have caught out all the riders if the weather conditions had been normal, but it had been so dry here for months. Rob Sartin was carrying some tools with him through here. He'd had a minor problem with the bike. Smithy was always well up on time. The course was quite bumpy through these trees. So, with nearly all the championship riders going clean, the only way to sort out the positions was on the special test at Cwmythig Hill. The top part of the test was very dusty. A lot of improvements had been made in the past 12 months. The course had been graded and there were some good jumps. A.D. Smith was going to entertain the spectators. And Rob Sartin wasn't going to disappoint anyone either. And what about Tiley? He'd been around here before at a motocross meeting. On this lap, everything went wrong and Carl hit the dust. He was back on his feet immediately, but that was a nasty fall. It cost him a good 20 seconds, which put him out of the running. After the championship riders had finished this lap of the test, I went over to see Carl. He was shaken up, but still in one piece.
Are you all right?
It would take more than one fall to stop Carl. Paul Maguire had a good day. He was averaging just over 5 minutes 41 on the test. Geraint was just a little quicker, 6 seconds up on Paul. John Deacon's first test was 5 seconds slower than the other two, and he was to get 13 points today. John looked good going over the tabletop. Chris Kosh, also slow on the first test, 2 seconds down on Deacon, but he made up for it second and third times round and beat Deacon by just over 0.2 of a second. A.D. Smith was nearly 12 seconds up on Chris Kosh and John Deacon. That was good enough for runner-up position. And the man who was winning again this weekend was Rob Sartin. He fell on the first test, but still won that one. And at the end of the day, he was over 6 seconds up on Smithy. So A.D. scores 17 points on this first day here at Rhayader. And for Rob Sartin, it's a maximum again. How many days has he won now? Is it 5? The league table for the expert riders was also interesting reading. Colin Selwood was on 73. That was 93 in total. That was 4th place overall. Matt Lewis, number 46 this weekend, was leading the 250s after 4 rounds with a score of 135. When he discarded his worst round, the Dovey, his score went down to 105. That was Stuart Bridges doing a wheelie. Stephen Murphy was lying 3rd in the 250s, 116 for 4 rounds and 90 for 3. The rider from the Isle of Man, Ewan Knight, meant business this weekend. He was on a brand new Suzuki. His 3-round total was 113, and that was the best in the class. The long grass, which some of the championship riders hadn't liked, was still around for the experts. Although several of the checks were reasonably tight, most of the experts went clean. I wonder what Ewan Knight had done with his old Honda. Perhaps Steve Collins had bought it back. In the 125s, number 65, Keith Isaac had got 82 points from his best 3 rounds. And the rider who was leading the class for 3 or 4 rounds was Tony Leishman. He'd got 113 points, or 93. His worst round was the Melville, where his score was only 20. Andrew Edwards' worst round was also the Melville, and that dropped his score back from 104 to 82. It was good to see Jonty Edmonds again. He'd been out of action for 3 rounds with a leg injury. Mark Vaughan's score was 90 from 3 rounds. Out on the test, it was the 4-stroke riders first. Paul McMinn set a cracking pace on both laps, averaging 5 minutes 48. That would have put him in the top 10 of the championship class. In the 250s, Stuart Bridges was 10 seconds down on McMinn at the end of the day, and Stuart got 11 points. Dave Hammonds beat Bridges by 1.5 seconds and scored 13 points. Stephen Murphy averaged just over 5 minutes 50. It was very close between him and Matt Lewis, but Murph had to settle for 3rd place in the class. Matt Lewis beat Murphy on both tests by 0.2 of a second each time, so he'd got a slender lead. It was enough to give him 17 points in the class, though. The fastest in the 250s, and indeed the fastest expert overall, was Ewan Knight. He was on a brand new bike, a Suzuki, for the first time, and it looked as though he'd been riding it for years. His times were incredibly fast, 5:42 and 5:38. That would have put him in the top half dozen of the championship. At the end of the day, he had a 20-second lead over Matt Lewis. In the 125s, Jonty Edmonds was back to form, put in a very fast first test and finished with 15 points in the class. Perhaps Jonty could have gone quicker, but this was a practice session for him for the 6 days when he would be riding for Wales. Andrew Edwards put in 2 consistent tests, just over 5 minutes 52. That was good enough to give him 5th place overall, and he got 17 points in the class. The winner of the 125s, though, was Tony Leishman, and he was a good 5 seconds up on Andrew Edwards. At the end of the day, Tony finished 3rd out of all the experts. Paul McMinn beat Tony by 2 seconds to take the runner-up position. But right out in front at the end of this first day was Ewan Knight. He was now sitting at the top of the league table. Some of the Clubman riders were going to find the going a bit tough here at Rhayader. Paul Mail was having a bit of trouble getting his Kawasaki to go in the right direction. Ewan Harrison made a slight detour and nearly got lost in the long grass. 4-stroke rider Julian Crimp couldn't quite keep his balance. It was a bit like the special test at the Dovey. Hamish Nichol was fighting a bit with his husky through here. Trevor Townsend was all over the course.
Right in front of you.
The problem here was 1 or 2 tree stumps hidden in the long grass. 2 Honda riders, was it Ian and Wayne Mundell? Russell Hicks was looking good. He was having a cool drink on the way round, and that might not have done him much good. Hopi was quick. He knew his way round. Well, he thought he did. It was a tactical move, really. He wanted to slow up the riders behind him. This was a tricky part of the course. 158 was Neil Jones, followed by Elvid James, who wasn't going to fall off this weekend. The Suzuki rider, Jonathan Thomas, and the 4th man, Greg Pascoe. Derek Gerrard setting up a dust cloud on the Forest Road. It was tough for anyone coming behind. This time it was Mike Smith from Landrindod. Dougal Walker was in for a surprise today. His rival John Taylor had not turned up, so Dougal was to win the class. Again, as with all the classes, the top places were sorted out on the special test. Dave Chalwell got 10 points in the 250s. Ian Mundell averaged just over 6 minutes 10 on the test, good enough to get 13 points. Mark Godfrey, number 120, was third. Wayne Mundell beat brother Ian by nearly 6 seconds to take the runner-up position and 17 points. The winner of this 250cc class was number 139, Robert Rayford. I hadn't seen him all day. Darryl Peach, who was leading the championship, had a very slow second test and scored only 4 points. In the 125s, Greg Pascoe had a total score of 92 points, and today he was going to finish 4th in the class. Hopi had got 102 points from 3 rounds and 128 in total. He had a slow first test here this morning, but still managed to get 15 points in the class. The rider who managed to get into second place and 8 seconds up on win was Simon Williams from Forden. This was his first championship round. The top 125cc rider yet again was Rowan Jones. On the first test he was the only Clubman rider to go around in under 6 minutes. Rowan was only a couple of seconds slower on lap 2, but he had to settle for runner-up position overall. The Premier Award went to Robert Rayford. Hopefully we would see that rider tomorrow. On day 2 it was very much the same, the weather hot and sunny. The going hadn't changed overnight, although the course was now in a different direction and there were 1 or 2 new bits. In the 4-stroke class, number 89, Mark Gleadhill had won the first day, but he wasn't going to win the second. Number 97, Peter McNair, got maximum points and took the Premier Award overall. Jason Chipchase had won the Open class yesterday and was hoping for a repeat again today. The Mundell brothers were sticking very close together. Justin Britton was going to finish the weekend with 24 points in the 250s, a good ride for him. And at last we see young Robert Rayford riding in his second championship round. He went to the Melville and got 37 points there. He was also the top Clubman rider here yesterday. Win Hope was down the field a bit, finishing 7th overall. This was home territory for him. Rowan Jones was runner-up. He hadn't made any mistakes really, but young Rayford had gone just that bit quicker. Dougal Walker finished with 37 points in the over 40s. He told me later it should have been maximum points, but he fell off on the special test. And over on the test, we meet up with Jason Chipchase again, who was to finish the best Open Clubman rider with a maximum score. But what had happened to Marcel Woon? It hadn't been his weekend.
On that tight check, I'm not sure it's the Wayne or the...
Yeah, or the first one, yeah, the Wayne, yeah.
Yeah, check forward 2 minutes early.
You shouldn't go so quick, see?
With the 250s, Ian Mundell had a slow first test and that dropped him down. His brother Wayne was 11 seconds quicker today and scored 32 points for the weekend. Dave Chalwell had a much better second day, runner-up in the 250s, and his score 27 points. But no one could beat young Robert Rayford. He won the 250cc class quite easily. Was he going to take the Premier Award though? Well, he would have to wait until Rowan Jones had finished. In the 125s, Hopi had another indifferent day on this test, a crash in second time round, and that dropped him down to 3rd place. Number 146, Simon Williams, had beaten Hopi on the first day, and he did the same on this second. Simon is planning to ride all the championship rounds next year. Only one more rider to come, Rowan Jones, and his father has told him what to do. With this last test to come, Rowan is 5 seconds down on Rayford. Rowan was set to win the 125s yet again, but wanted to take the Premier Award. This last test had to be quicker than 6 minutes and 5 seconds. Rowan made no mistakes. He equalled his first time of 6:01, and he took the Premier Award. With the expert classes, there weren't many changes on Sunday. Paul McMinn easily won the 4-stroke class, although his second test was rather slow for him. Murray Thompson won the open class, but not really a convincing win. He was second on both days. Trevor Jones won the first day and then retired. Steve Griffiths won the second after losing a lot of time on the first. In the 250s, Stephen Murphy finished third on both days, 30 points for him. Murph was only 2 seconds down on Matt Lewis, but the difference in points was 4 in Matt's favour. And the top 250cc rider for the second day, and the man to take the Premier Award, Joan Knight. In the 125s, Jonty Edmonds finished fourth today, and his score for the weekend, 28. Andrew Edwards did a little better, his score 32, and the best 125cc rider. Vaughan was runner-up in the class on this second day. He'd scored 28 points. But the man who won both days was Tony Leishman from Dunstable, and he finished runner-up to Joan Knight. Day 2 for the championship riders was quite demanding, with tight checks in the Wain and the Red Lion forests, and just a little bit tighter than yesterday.
Go! Become my boy!
I had found an interesting spot and got Jelly Bean here for company. I would like to have seen this part of the course on a wet time. Wyn Hughes would have liked to go in much tougher. It wasn't his weekend. Smithy was used to anything. He had to go careful, though, not to check in early. He had time in hand.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
What about the next one?
Um,
That'll be tight, won't it?
yeah, last time I had 1.5 minutes, and it tightens up 3 minutes.
Just be all right then, won't you?
Well, hopefully.
And the next one was the Red Lion Forest, and here the riders couldn't hang about. Clerk of the course, Alan Bates, was here to make sure that everything was going smoothly. Paul Maguire looked to be just on time when he came to the halfway stage. Ady had made up a little on Maguire. It could be all important. He'd managed to pass Nick Morgan. At the check, John Deacon was the first rider to come in. He'd timed it spot on. It was a bit of a panic for the next 2 or 3. That's Chris Walton. Phil Smithson comes straight in. And Richard Hay. Geraint had enough time to check the clock. And the same for Smithy as well. Possibly he could have checked in early. So from here it was back to the special test to sort out the final places. It's Carl Tiley who we're going to see first. That one mistake he made yesterday dropped him down several places. Today he finished 5th overall, averaging 5:38 on the test. Carl's score for this weekend, 19 points. The Rhayader had not been one of his better rounds. John Deacon was consistent on the test today, averaging 5:36. That was good enough for 4th place overall, and John's total score was 26. It was very entertaining around the tabletop jump. Here's Richard Hay. The rider who finished third yesterday and third again today was Chris Kosh. He was having a good weekend. He changed back from mooses to tubes. It was giving him much quicker test times. His first one yesterday was slow, but today he was averaging about 5:35. Koch's score was 30 points, his best championship round. Eddie Smith took the runner-up position, beating Chris Kosh by 6 seconds on this second day. Smithy's first test was 5:31. Next time round he slipped back to 5:39. And on his last test of the weekend it was just over 5 minutes 32. Adi said at the end of the day that the test didn't really suit the 125. He was lacking in power on parts of the course. Nevertheless, he was runner-up on both days and scored 34 points. And who won Rhayader? Well, you must have guessed by now. It was Rob Sartin. He was 37 seconds up on A.D. Smith. Rob had not only won both days, but he'd won every special test here. He was the only rider to clock in at under 5 minutes 30, and he did that 5 times. After 5 championship rounds, Rob Sartin's total score is 178 points. Let's suppose for a moment that he doesn't go to the Beacons, so that will be his final score. Smithy, his nearest rival, has scored 137 from 4 rounds. Even if Adi could win both days at the Beacons, he still couldn't beat Rob. So now we are watching the new British champion, Rob Sartin. He has won the season after 5 rounds. Before we go, we must have a quick word with Rob. His next event will be the 6 days in Poland. He's one of the members of our very strong trophy team.
The letting back from Poland.
Yeah, do your best in Poland, don't you?
Of course you will.
Congratulations, Rob.